Yes. Okay, well, yeah, I just wanted to, Reese, thank you for asking me to help out. It's a pleasure to help out. And just briefly, I want to tell you about my career. I went to school to the University of South Carolina, got my degree there, Bachelor of Arts degree, worked for the student newspaper, creating graphics and illustrations for them, enjoyed that student newspaper atmosphere, and I decided, okay, when I get out of college, I would like to work in a newsroom. And so that's what I ended up doing, and I got a job creating graphics for newspapers. I started out at the Augusta Chronicle, then I went to the Charlotte Observer in North Carolina, and then after that I went to Washington, D.C., where I became an animator and animated graphics, created animated graphics that explained the news rather than just still or print graphics. That was a really great job. I enjoyed it. It was ahead of its time though. After 7 years, Knight Ridder had to shut it down. And so then I ended up getting an offer here in San Antonio. So I came here to work for the San Antonio Express News, creating graphics and animations for them. I did that for about 15 years. And if you've been following the newspaper industry at all, you know that over the last like 10 or 20 years, it's been in a downward trajectory. And what the Express News did about a year or two ago is they offered a buyout to people in the newsroom, and I decided it was time to take that buyout. So I did that, and now I am trying to make my way as a self-employed artist. So it's a give and take, because you don't have the guaranteed income month to month, but you have your freedom. Because you get to work on the stuff you really want to work on. So it's definitely a trade-off, and you got to be ready for it. But I'm enjoying it, and I've been doing that since January, and getting more and more work. And I think it's going to work out. It's just it's a little different from having that regular paycheck when you know what you're going to get every month.
There are a few of my questions in there.
Okay.
There are a few of those. And you definitely filled in some blanks too.
Okay.
I did not know about Washington, D.C., where you learned animation. I did not know about that.
Well, I'd always been a fan of animation. I'd been creating print graphics for newspapers, but was always a fan of animation. And when you know, Macintosh computer, when they first produced a computer that I could actually afford and take home, one of the first things I wanted to do was learn about animation. And like I can remember, I downloaded this really crummy little program from AOL, this America Online, and I said, honey, come here. And I had made a cube rotate. Wow, look, honey, look, it's a cube rotating. Can you believe I can do this in our living, you know? So I was really into animation. And then I found out that the company that owned the Charlotte Observer, where I was working, Knight Ridder, they had an operation in DC where they had animators creating news content, and so I wanted to go there. And so I hounded and harassed them until they finally hired me. That's what happened. And enjoyed that, learned a lot there. And like I said, that operation was shut down. The whole department was just let go. It was really horrible. But it was a good idea. It was ahead of its time a little bit, and ended up getting an offer here for the Express News in San Antonio.
And that was another blank that I had asked about was what prompted you to come to San Antonio?
Yeah, I got that offer, and always wanted to come back out west from the East Coast, because when I was a kid, my dad was in the Air Force and we lived all over, and one of the places we lived was New Mexico, and had a great time there. And so I convinced my wife to move everyone to San Antonio, and she agreed. Yes, so when I was at the Express News, I started working there in 2005. In 2008, they had a huge layoff. Now I managed to survive that one. They got rid of like a third of the employees in the newsroom. Okay, I survived that one, but it's like 3 of the 4 artists that were around me, where I sat at work, were let go. And so everyone was devastated by that. Anyway, after that I thought, I need to have a plan B. So I went back to school to Incarnate Word to get my master's degree in communication arts. That allowed me to teach. That's where I met you, the cartooning class. Although I don't think you strictly need a master's degree to teach those community art classes, but still, I was thinking in terms of teaching. And so teaching for Art Institute of San Antonio, teaching for the Southwest School of Art, and I'm going to do that again this coming summer, do some more teaching. But anyway, that's why I decided to get a master's degree, because I thought I needed a plan B. Because this newspaper gig, man, I don't know how long that's going to last, you know? Yeah.
That's actually good news for me, because I was going for a teaching degree for a while, but I ended up giving that up. But I still have some interest in teaching, and specifically, I was actually hoping to teach comics at some point too. So that's actually interesting to know.
Yeah, I would definitely have some sort of plan, like a plan B, and even C and D too, because cartooning can be a tough road to travel. Like I just have been reading about DC Comics. They are like reorganizing their whole department. Like I think they're gonna let go a lot of talented people, illustrators and writers, because their sales are just like that. I think a lot of people just tend to look at the superheroes in the movies and in animations on Disney Plus or whatever. So actually, doing that kind of cartooning work, some of those jobs may not be as plentiful as they used to be.
The public, I think it's true that the public interest has definitely shifted from comics to the stuff that I guess more, I'll say, exploits the kind of legacy of comics.
Yeah, definitely.
Entertainment.
Yeah.
And it's like the trade-off for the viewing audience. Do I want to read all of this stuff from the source material, or do I want to see the cliff notes put in its own version?
Yeah. And one of the things, like a continuing joke with me and some other of my friends is, they have comic book conventions, right? So you go to the comic book conventions, and it's like, you can't even find anyone who sells comic books. Or it's like 1 out of every 8 vendors actually sells comic books. The rest of it is movie stuff, Funko Pop toys, all that sort of thing. Whereas the comics aspect a lot of times gets lost. Not in every show, but in a lot of shows that call themselves comic conventions, you see very little comic book stuff.
It's very true. It's actually quite a shame, because I know that the legacy is very, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's a weird point of view for me, because I actually learned to love comics mainly by being exposed to the material being made off of comics. I think maybe my generation probably experienced that.
Now have you gone back and looked at some of the original comic books that inspired the movies and that sort of thing?
It's funny. On that note, it was me and my brother as kids. We became exposed to these particular books called something. They were all basically encyclopedias of the entire history of comic book characters.
Yeah.
Especially when a new movie came out for Spider-Man, for example, or X-Men.
Yeah.
They published a new one, and me and my brother read that. And then Hulk came out, and Ghost Rider came out.
Well, good. Yeah, you can appreciate the movie more if you know something about that background.
Yeah. But and then it's like, it's actually, on that note, it's actually interesting that the more that they try to make TV shows and games and movies off of the original material, the more they have to explore what the original material had to offer. It's funny. It's so funny how that kind of leads into the exposure of the general audience.
Yeah, and there's a ton of good material there in the comic world, and not even just Marvel and DC. A lot of other comic book companies, Dark Horse and others, have lots of really great original material. Of course, a lot of comics these days, I think a lot of writers now are sort of wise to that, and they're maybe writing some of their material as if it is a Netflix pitch. You know what I mean? Because I know that could happen, because there's so much comic material on Netflix and on those streaming services now. I think some of them actually do write with that in mind.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to pull out my questions.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Just so I don't miss.
Yeah.
Actually, I have 2 copies. Would you like one?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see what's been answered already. Okay. I'll just take a leap and I'll ask the first question.
Yeah.
And the first question is, you've been an artist for a long time. Aside from your independent work, you've had other jobs as well, San Antonio Express, Southwest School of Art. For most artists, it's necessary to seek out some more stable employment. Did you ever find that any of these jobs took creative energy away from your independent work?
Well, no, I did not find that. As a matter of fact, the jobs that I had enhanced that. Now, there's a caveat to that. I was fortunate enough to have a job that was an artistic creative job, creating graphics for newspapers. So doing that sort of work and working with other people and working with other artists, that enhanced my creative work at home. Okay. Now, if I had had a job as an air conditioning repairman, let's say, and there's nothing wrong with a job as an air conditioning repairman, but let's say I had that job, it probably would have paid a lot more. That would have paid the bills and all. It wouldn't have enhanced my creative work at home like a newspaper design job and graphics job did. So I was fortunate enough to get a job that was at least in that creative field. Okay, it wasn't doing only what I wanted to draw. Like I wasn't sitting around drawing pictures of Batman all day long. But I got to do creative work. I got to work with creative people. I got to come up with illustrations to convey a message for a Sunday editorial piece. I got to learn how to communicate visually with maps, graphics, charts, diagrams, and that helped me tremendously with my independent work. So if you can get a regular, so-called regular job, try to get it as much in the realm of the arts as you possibly can, because it will help you.
Okay, that's really good to know. Okay, that is already. Oh, okay. Here's a fun one. Based on your history and artistic output, it's obvious that you have a lot of passion for classic science fiction. I know you got hooked on Starlog magazine early on, but what specifically introduced your love for sci-fi?
Yeah, I did get hooked on Starlog magazine and also as a contributor to Starlog magazine for many years as a cartoonist. But what specifically introduced me to sci-fi? Well, I just remember as a kid, anything on TV that was weird or unusual, Lost in Space, Star Trek, Space Ghost, Johnny Quest, any of those live-action shows or movies or animations, I just gravitated towards. I don't know, maybe it was because they were just unusual. I remember when the original Planet of the Apes movie came out with Charlton Heston, I harassed my parents to take me to see that, and I was probably 8 or 9 or something. And then it terrified me. I was really horrified by that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know, just, you're just drawn to things, and I was just drawn to those sorts of things, and, I think some people maybe have a need to just create things and do things and think of unusual items. They want to, they're just maybe not satisfied with the normal lifestyle that you might have, and they want to think of something strange or weird. What's some weird thing I could draw? And that's what I would do.
Oh, that's very good. I wrote this as kind of a follow-up. It's sort of, when did you realize you wanted to be a cartoonist? Like, when did you transition from being a fan of all this to wanting to create it?
Well, I started producing my own little comic books, which were fun. And then, back when I was growing up, there were all sorts of publications, little like newspapers and magazines that catered to the comics, science fiction, and horror sort of industry. And I just started sending in some of my work to some of these places, and they said yes, they would print some of it. Like I did a character called 3D Pete for the Comics Buyer's Guide, which was a newspaper, came out every week about the comic book industry. Crazy. Now I did that when I was a young man, like in my 20s. But yeah, if you just have a body of work, you send it in and you see. And then here's a favorite quote of mine. I believe, and it's attributed to Woody Allen, is what I read. And he said 85% of success is just showing up. Okay? You just show up. That means when I sent my cartoon work in, it wasn't very good. But it was there. It was in an envelope in their office, and they could see it. And they said, well, you know, this guy's willing to do it. Let's get him to put a comic. You know, I was there. Whereas someone else who was maybe a better cartoonist than me, but maybe just didn't take the trouble to put the stamp on the envelope and show up in their office, they didn't ask him to create a cartoon strip because they didn't know he existed. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So just the fact that I was there and had the work there, they said, okay, let's go with this. So you just gotta send it out there and see what happens.
85%.
85% of success is just showing up. Not even talent. There's no talent there. Just show up. Yeah.
I only heard one quote from Woody Allen out of context, and it's from a sci-fi movie he did, and he's like something about death and sex, and after death
Sounds like Woody Allen.
And after death I don't get nauseous.
Yeah, that sounds like him for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to restart it so I can manage the material better.